Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today's program looks at endurance, economic, civic, and personal. We begin with small businesses because they're often the first to register when the economy shifts.
We'll also turn to politics. As Michigan prepares to choose a new U.S. Senator, we'll hear from a candidate about how this moment is changing the stakes of the race.
Then, a look at the infrastructure beneath our feet. In Southwest Detroit, a new tunnel project is underway to manage water and prevent flooding.
In the second hour, a collection of stories captures girlhood in 1970s and 80s Detroit, and what young girls learned early about fear, authority, and survival.
How people hold steady and how they carry history forward while doing it. This is the Metro.
Before we move forward with today's show, I want to pause on something shaping this moment. This weekend, the killing of Alex Preddy has shaken people across the country. Preddy was a 37-year-old intensive care nurse who worked with veterans. He was shot and killed by federal immigration agents during an enforcement operation in Minneapolis on Saturday. Federal authorities say he violently resisted brandishing a gun, but video footage released since then doesn't show that. His death follows the killing of Renee Good, who was also shot by a federal immigration agent earlier this month. And it comes amid a longer list of people who've died during immigration enforcement or in federal custody. All this is not normal. Meanwhile, several times on this show, people have said immigration enforcement has already crossed the line here in Southeast Michigan. So this week on the show, we'll be trying to make sense of this moment of immigration enforcement, how it's affecting communities here, and if Detroit could become the next Minneapolis. We turn now to our first segment. We begin today's show by assessing the backbone of our economy, local small businesses, because their condition tells us a lot about how people are really doing right now. In Metro Detroit, inflation has cooled. Prices here were up about 2% over the past year, but that doesn't mean life feels affordable. People are still careful with spending, and many owners say they're not thinking about growth. They're thinking about endurance, how to last. One pressure point keeps coming up: healthcare. Small businesses, health plans in Michigan are rising again for 2026, and tens of thousands fewer Michiganders are signing up for individual coverage. So today we're talking about how small businesses have become survival engines for families, community anchors for neighborhoods, and stress points for owners, all at the same time. Joining me is Mark Lee. He's president of the Lee Group, a Detroit-based firm that works with small businesses on strategy, marketing, and growth. He also teaches business at Michigan universities and talks with owners across Southeast Michigan about what they're facing right now. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you, Robyn, for having me. I enjoy it. Thank you so
Mark,
much.
Last time you were here, inflation really dominated our conversation. You've described a shift from worrying about prices to something deeper. What are owners telling you now about how this moment feels?
Yeah, the moment right now feels certainly a moment of uncertainty. If you look at it globally, a lot of people are saying, hey, the economy is doing fairly well nationally. At the federal government level, you will hear that story as well. But when we talk to small businesses, they are feeling significantly different. And the reason for that is while inflation has cooled, there are financial pressures that they're dealing with on a daily basis. So, for example, the cost of goods are still increasing. For example, hiring talent is still a challenge at this point. For example, we're seeing a shift in the workforce. There's a structural shift in the workforce where we're seeing a move towards technology. And a lot of small businesses are not comfortable with the shift in the technology. I know that sounds strange because they're used to doing things a certain way. So when you shift that technology from a certain point to another point, small businesses are grappling with that. So 2 or 3 of those are critical factors that are certainly creating this uneasiness. And the last piece is, quite frankly, customers are a little bit uncertain at this point as well. They're buying, they're spending, but a lot of small businesses are not necessarily seeing the same levels that they've seen in the past years.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit prices aren't surging like they were, but I get the sense, to your point, that customers still feel squeezed. So, Mark, when you walk into a shop or a restaurant today, what are the small clues that tell you demand is fragile?
I would tell you, even late last week, I went into a couple of restaurants and I was amazed at how empty they were. And I did talk to a couple of the managers. Now, one, let's be fully transparent. The weather has been really obviously cold and people are staying home.
Yeah.
We get that. But when I talked to the manager, I said, is this an ongoing trend? He said, yes, it is. He says, our business right now, our business model is that we staff up for certain levels. And right now, Mark, we're overstaffed in some situations. And I said, why is that the situation? It's exactly what we talked about. A lot of the customers are assessing their budgets. They're trying to figure out, hey, do you want to go out for a nice dinner at night or do we just want to stay home? Weather aside, a lot of people are beginning to stay at home, for example, just so they can get more savings, enjoy the comforts of home this time of the year. So that's one clue that I'm seeing is that in terms of the number of folks going to restaurants. Another clue that I'm seeing right now, quite frankly, is that a lot of small businesses are not investing in their businesses. What they're doing is they're investing in sustainability, not necessarily growth. They're afraid. There's a hesitancy to invest in their own business to grow. Their only mindset right now is to focus on sustainability. And the question they're asking themselves, quite candidly, can I survive until next week, until next month, until next year? Mm-hmm. So another clue, quite frankly, is how they're developing their strategic plans and what they're focusing on in terms of the resources.
Well, this makes me think about the Detroit Regional Chamber's new January outlook, which shows a lot of what you're speaking to, which is uncertainty. Only about a quarter of business owners expect the economy to improve in the next 3 months. When owners feel this kind of ongoing uncertainty, what are some of the first decisions they're making? I mean, you're talking about this this shift, this mindset shift from growth to survival.
That's the first thing that we're seeing, and thank you for referencing that report, and I'm glad to hear it reinforces what we're talking about. So from a business perspective, the mindset shift is just that. I need to focus on short term. A lot of times we tell businesses to make sure you have a long-term plan. Make sure that you're working towards that plan. But the reality of the situation, Robyn, is that people are focusing on the short term. They're focusing on survival. You just made a good point as it relates to tariffs, for example. And although inflation is cool, there's still a lot of uncertainty about the tariffs. And people are clearly trying to figure out, well, where do I put my resources? Do I need to absorb that cost from a business perspective as a small business owner? Or do I pass that cost on to my customers in terms of raising prices? If I raise the prices, what's the risk? And the risk is I may lose that particular customer that I've had a long-standing relationship with. So the bottom line is the fundamental shift is that we're seeing one, while businesses want to grow, sustain and grow themselves, the bottom line is they're really focused on tomorrow, short term, and trying to figure out what do I do next.
Let's stay on this Detroit Regional Chamber report because the January outlook also finds that 38% of business owners expect those tariffs to hurt them this year. So what does that look like on the ground? I mean, you said that there is this push and pull with owners who are saying, do I translate these costs? Do I pass these higher costs along to the customer? And there's still a lot of folks who are torn about that. What else does that look like?
So what else it looks like, if you are let's say you are a supplier and you're trying to source product, the question you got to ask yourself now is, where do I source my product from? So in other words, do I try to find domestic suppliers that I can partner with so that I can certainly avoid that tariff? And if I can avoid that tariff, then I don't have to absorb that cost, number one, and I don't have to worry about passing it on to customers. Or do I partner with other suppliers again, globally or domestically, to try to figure out the best way to leverage those resources. And again, I'm going to go back to the fundamental point. A small business is not a large business. A large business has the resources, the capital, the connections, and the context to make those types of decisions. At the street level, a small business does not have those types of resources. So the decisions that they make are much more monumental, has a much more financial impact on what they decide to do. So the bottom line, what does it look like? Do I continue to use the suppliers and source my business the way I'm currently doing it? Or do I look at options, whether domestically or partner with other small businesses to make it happen? And that's a challenge for a lot of small businesses at this point.
I want to think about another stress point that small businesses are feeling. Small business health plans in Michigan are rising by about 11% this year. When that renewal notice arrives, what does the owner do in real life? What gets delayed? What gets cut? What gets passed along?
When that bill comes, Robyn, it's sticker shock. It's sticker shock. And a lot of the small businesses, let's say you're a solopreneur, for example, not just an entrepreneur, but a solopreneur. A lot of these businesses rely directly on the exchange, for example, for their health care. So now let's say these subsidies have expired and they're getting those bills right now. And so there's a sticker shock. And so now they're saying, and I'm not even talking about insuring those employees, I'm talking them insuring themselves. So the first thing they got to do is decide, what are my other options when it comes to health insurance? Where else do I need to cut? Let's just say, for example, your premium has doubled, more than doubled, for the sake of conversation. And so the question becomes, if you have limited resources, one, you can increase your revenue stream. One is, how do you do that? Identify sources of revenue. Two is you can cut your costs. Again, that's a challenge for small businesses. So you look at your financials and decide, where do you need to cut your costs? Number three is you reallocate your resources. Excuse me. So if those costs on the healthcare space are certainly going up, and I'm sure that they currently are, you have to reallocate your resources. And I hate to say this, in some situations, a reallocation of resources could lead to a reduction in headcount. So there are significant implications from a healthcare perspective. Healthcare is clearly important for businesses, whether you're small, medium, or large. You want to take care of your employees. But again, everything boils down to the bottom line, and it's going to have a significant impact on the bottom line.
And then on the worker side, roughly 40,000 fewer Michiganders signed up for marketplace plans this year. When more workers are uninsured or underinsured, what does that do inside a small workplace?
It impacts your ability to deliver their products and services. So one of the things that a business is going to do is, while they want to provide health care to the employees, again, the bottom line is going to say, can we afford to supply health care to our employees? And so now that's where there's a pull and pull here. The workers are saying, well, I need health insurance, and so that I can go to work and take care of my family. But the business is saying, I can't necessarily supply you with health insurance. And so what you're finding is that some businesses might 1099 or subcontract their work out, right, to employees. So they may not become a full-time employee, but you can subcontract that work. So if I 1099 an employee, now what have I done? I've shifted the health care from my business to you, because as a 1099 or a subcontractor, you are now responsible for your own insurance. So there's a shift, and again, in the fundamental model of how we've done business in the past, and moving forward, those are the types of options that businesses will have. So you may find them making their employees part-time, and then 1099 them, and having them get their own insurance plans.
I want to stay on the experience of workers here for a moment, Mark, and I want to test a theory with you. Instead of headline layoffs, we're seeing tightening in quieter ways. Folks are getting their hours trimmed, or positions are being left open. There are fewer raises happening. Does that track with what you're seeing, and what does it do to trust between workers and employers?
That is very consistent with what we're seeing right now. Businesses are tightening the belt. So again, you're going to hear conflicting headlines. Some people are going to say, well, businesses are beginning to invest. Some people might say there are cautious optimism out there. And maybe some businesses have the right to say that, and maybe it's true. But the reality of the situation is, going back to what we said at the top of this conversation, we are seeing a shift in the mindset of the business owner, a shift in how people are investing their resources, and what's going to happen to the relationship between the worker and the business owner, for example, or the worker in a business. It's going to become divisive. There's going to be a sense of lack of trust because in the American society, historically, people have worked for a company, let's be honest, because of the wages, because of the benefits, and quite frankly, a sense of self-purpose. And in return, they were expecting something from the company or the business. In today's environment, we're seeing much more people. We see people becoming much more cautious, much more skeptical, and they're not necessarily sure, in all candor, about their own future with a particular organization, whether it's small, medium, or large.
I want to end on the note of businesses as community anchors. So we're kind of shifting gears a little bit, but still really talking about the human aspect of business. We're talking during what has become a brutal winter, Mark. And here in Metro Detroit, that means a lot of people are at home. They're more isolated. You've talked about people using coffee shops and neighborhood businesses for connection, places to be around other people. What are businesses doing intentionally or unintentionally that makes them feel like safe third spaces right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're finding businesses that are trying to get out to meet customers where they are. I know that we've become so reliant upon technology and we have become much more isolated. But we know that, to your point, businesses are the anchors of neighborhoods. And so we're finding that depending on the type of business that you have, for example, we're finding that people are meeting businesses where they are and vice versa. And what that means is not necessarily just to Zoom. It's important that businesses continue to communicate with their customers on an ongoing basis, whether it's through social media, whether it's through a traditional phone call, whether it's through co-working spaces. We are now seeing businesses are meeting people at coffee shops. Hey, I'll meet you for a cup of coffee. Let's talk about this, right? Or maybe at a co-working space, for example, down at the train station where they have a large co-working space down there that's typically free. So businesses are trying to think creatively in terms of engaging their client bases. They're trying to think differently in terms of how to communicate their products and services to customers. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, it's important that the lines of communication remain open because right now that's what people are looking for. We are growing up in a society that's based on technology that challenges us in terms of the personalization, and businesses have to figure out how to knock down that wall and truly become personable. They are truly the anchors of our neighborhoods. In Detroit, we have 62,000 small businesses. Upwards of 200,000 people are employed in the small business sector. So that's important, and it's important that we make sure that we maintain that level of personalization.
Mark Lee is president of the Lee Group. It's a Detroit-based firm that works with small businesses on strategy, marketing, and growth. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
It's the Metro on WDET. Up next, 3 Democrats are competing for the vacant Senate seat left by Gary Peters' departure. We'll hear from one candidate, Abdul El-Sayed, including whether he would abolish ICE if elected. That's coming up next here on the Metro. Stay with us.